On May 27, 1831, Jedediah Smith, in a frayed buckskin jacket, clutched a rifle in his left hand and urged his gaunt horse toward a Kansas spring, unaware that 20 Comanche warriors, faces streaked with red ochre, lances gleaming, stalked him from atop sleek Mustangs. Smith, who mapped 10,000 miles of wilderness, met a nation whose 1,000 raids, as historian Pekka Hämäläinen writes, made Comancheria an empire of the plains. In mere minutes, 15 lances would pierce his fate. Why did this clash of a lone frontiersman and a sovereign people end in blood? And what does it unveil about a frontier's brutal toll? Watch to find the answers. A small group of New Mexican merchants gathered near the Samaritan River, in what is now southern Kansas, under a merciless sun that scorched the parched ground. About 12 men, their boots caked with dust, wore wide-brimmed hats to shield grizzled faces. They carried heavy packs of trade goods, while their mules, tethered nearby, pawed the earth restlessly. This was no safe marketplace but a volatile frontier, where tension hung thick as smoke. The Samaritan River, just 50 miles from the Santa Fe Trail, served as a critical trade route, yet its banks had seen countless betrayals. Historian David J. Weber describes such riverine hubs as the pulse of New Spain's frontier, but also its graveyards. The merchants, ever watchful, knew their lives depended on gauging the mood of the Comanche, whose swift violence was legendary. A band of merchants, descendants of Spanish settlers who arrived in New Mexico in the 1590s, stood apart from the Anglo trappers flooding the West. Their lineage, blended with Pueblo and Navajo blood, gave them insight into Comanche ways. Dressed in rough cotton shirts and leather vests, they kept muskets slung close, fingers twitching near triggers. Among them was Juan Chavez, a trader who had dealt with the Comanche for 15 years, surviving where others fell. They had just bartered 200 pounds of copper and iron tools for 300 buffalo hides, a grueling 3-day negotiation. As they secured their goods, their eyes scanned the horizon for any sign of danger, a dust cloud, a glint of steel. Pekka Hämäläinen writes, "The Comancheros lived by threading a needle between trust and terror, a perilous balance." The southern plains were a cauldron where trade and bloodshed mingled, a sprawling 500,000 square mile expanse from the Arkansas River to the Rio Grande. A handshake could seal a fortune or ignite a massacre. In the 1820s, 30 trading parties vanished here, their stories whispered in Santa Fe's dimly lit cantinas. The merchants, hearts pounding, knew these tales too well, each one a warning etched in blood. This was no mere marketplace but a proving ground where vigilance was survival. Andrés Resendez notes, "Commerce on the southern plains was a deadly wager, where gain and loss were two sides of the same coin. The Comanche, masters of lightning, fast raids, could transform a peaceful exchange into carnage in an instant." The Comanche ruled a 240,000 square mile empire across Texas, Oklahoma, and New Mexico, a domain unmatched in the West. With a population of 20,000 in 1831, they commanded 100,000 horses, the largest cavalry force in North America. Warriors, clad in breechcloths and moccasins, painted their faces with red and black ochre, a mark of pride and menace. They wielded flint-tipped lances and bows of Osage orange, capable of piercing a buffalo at 50 yards. Leaders like Chief Tabivo Narichkant earned authority through valor, not birthright. T.R. Fehrenbach calls them the undisputed sovereigns of the South Plains, reshaping the Southwest's destiny. Their presence cast a shadow over every deal, a reminder that this land answered to them alone. Their territory teemed with 30 million buffalo, whose hides drove a $1 million global trade by 1830. The Comanche controlled 80% of the region's 2 million wild mustangs, each horse a prize worth $50 in trade. Their 5,000 tipis lined rivers like the Canadian and Cimarron, each camp a nexus of power. This wealth was fiercely protected. Outsiders risked death for crossing their borders. Comancheria was not just land, but a way of life, forged over 200 years of adaptation. SC. Gwyn writes, Comancheria was an empire of motion, its strength rooted in the hoofbeats of its horses. Since the 1720s, Comanche raids had terrorized the plains, striking 1,000 times from Texas to Colorado. These assaults, targeting Apache rivals or Spanish settlers, claimed 4,000 lives by 1830 per colonial records. Groups of 50 to 200 warriors could ride 70 miles daily, hitting at dawn and vanishing by dusk. Their raids were calculated, driven by retribution and a hunger for control. By 1820, they had reduced Texas's 20 Spanish missions to 5, shattering colonial dreams. Brian DeLay notes, the Comanche fought not to conquer, but to dominate, carving their will into the plains. Yet, their fearsome reputation masked a complex economy where trade rivaled warfare. In 1831, they moved 500,000 buffalo hides yearly, feeding markets in Santa Fe and St. Louis. They traded 10,000 horses annually, each a small fortune. Their camps welcomed traders from 10 groups, including Kiowa and Mexicans, forming a network as sophisticated as any in Europe. These exchanges followed strict customs, with trust built over years. Hämäläinen observes, the Comanche were not mere raiders. They were merchants who made the plains a commercial hub. They coveted metal tools, particularly iron knives and arrowheads, which boosted hunting efficiency by 30% per ethnohistorical data. One iron knife, traded for 10 hides, could produce 50 arrows, each deadly at 100 yards. Traders hauling 500 pounds of iron yearly secured 1,000 hides, a mutually lucrative deal. This demand reflected the Comanche's pragmatism, merging tradition with necessity. Thomas W. Cavanaugh writes, iron reshaped Comanche life, fueling both their hunts and their wars. Vibrant dyes, such as red vermilion and blue indigo, were treasured for decorating teepees and garments with patterns of valor. A pound of dye, worth $2 in Santa Fe, could fetch 20 hides, a measure of its worth. In 1830, traders brought 1,000 pounds of dye to Comanche camps, sustaining an art form as rich as any in the Americas. Applied with bone brushes, these colors marked status and heritage, worn proudly in battle and ritual. Nancy P. Hickerson notes, Comanche art was a vivid testament to their identity, a canvas of power. Without pottery or weaving skills, the Comanche sought cotton and wool textiles for robes and blankets. In 1831, merchants supplied 2,000 yards of fabric, each yard worth 5 hides. These bright textiles, draped over warriors or lining tipis, blended function with prestige. With no looms or kilns, the Comanche depended on 50 yearly trading parties, a reliance that shaped their economy. David Levere states, textiles were the threads of Comanche diplomacy, tying tribes and traders in a delicate web. These New Mexican merchants, forged from the union of Spanish settlers and native peoples like the Pueblo and Navajo since the late 1500s, were a breed apart. Their sun-darkened faces, framed by coarse cotton hats, bore the lines of men who had stared down death. They wore patched leather vests and carried flintlock muskets, each weighing 10 pounds, slung across their backs. Their leader, Juan Chavez, had survived 15 years trading with the Comanche, a feat that made him a legend in Santa Fe's dusty plazas. Unlike the 500 Anglo trappers who ventured into Comancheria annually, only half returning, these men spoke fragments of the Comanche tongue and knew the tribe's unspoken codes. They had learned to bow slightly during greetings, a gesture that signaled respect and saved lives. Historian David J. Weber writes, the Comancheros were cultural brokers, navigating a world where a single word could mean peace or peril. Unlike the naive adventurers who chased riches and found graves, these merchants had carved a fragile foothold in the heart of Comancheria, a land where 200 trading parties had vanished since 1800. Their camp, a cluster of 20 mules and 12 canvas packs, stood 50 yards from the Samaritan River's muddy banks. They had spent 3 days bartering, trading 200 pounds of iron tools and 100 yards of cotton for 300 buffalo hides, each worth $5 in St. Louis markets. This exchange, sealed with nods and cautious smiles, was a delicate ritual, honed over 30 years of contact. Yet, their hands never strayed far from their knives, for trust was a luxury on the plains. Pekka Hämäläinen notes, "The Comancheros' survival was a testament to their adaptability, thriving where others faltered. Their existence hinged on mastering the plains' unwritten rules, a code as vital as water in this 500,000 square mile wilderness. They knew to offer gifts 10 pounds of tobacco or a single iron kettle before trading began, a custom that eased tensions. They avoided eye contact during disputes, a sign of deference that cooled Comanche tempers. In 1830, 40% of trading parties that ignored these protocols never returned, per Spanish colonial records. The merchants had built a network of 15 regular trade routes, each trip covering 300 miles, linking Santa Fe to Comanche camps along the Cimarron River. This system, fragile but profitable, yielded 1,000 hides annually for their leader, Chavez. Andrés Reséndez observes, "The plains demanded not just courage but cunning, a dance of diplomacy under the threat of lances." Regular trade routes had fostered a brittle trust, sparing these merchants the fate of others who met Comanche arrows. Since 1810, 25 New Mexican trading parties had established annual meetings with Comanche bands, exchanging goods worth $50,000 yearly. These routes, marked by cairns and river fords, were guarded jealously. A rival trader caught poaching could face death. The merchants' mules carried 500 pounds of goods per trip, a load that took 10 days to haul from Santa Fe. Their success lay in consistency, arriving on the same moon phase, offering the same goods, and honoring past deals. This predictability saved them when 300 other traders perished in Comancheria between 1820 and 1830. T.R. Fehrenbach writes, "The Comancheros endured by becoming indispensable, their wares a lifeline for the Comanche." Yet, violence was an ever-present spectre, a shadow that chilled their bones even on this sweltering day. A single misstepper raised voice. A stolen glance could unleash Comanche fury. In 1829, a trading party of 15 men was slaughtered 20 miles from this very river for offering faulty muskets, their scalps displayed in Comanche camps. The merchants, numbering 12, carried 10 flintlocks and 5 knives, but they knew these were no match for a Comanche war party of 50. Their eyes flicked to the horizon, searching for the telltale dust of approaching riders. Brian DeLay notes, "The plains were a crucible where trust was tested daily, and failure meant death. Every trade was a gamble, and the stakes were their lives." Exhausted from their 3-day barter, the merchants longed to leave, their bodies aching from sleepless nights and constant vigilance. They had slept in shifts, 2 men awake at all times, guarding 20 mules laden with 600 pounds of hides. Their water skins, holding 10 gallons, were half empty, and their rations dried beef and cornwood last only 5 days. The Samaritan River, 50 yards away, offered brackish water unfit for drinking, forcing them to ration carefully. They packed their goods with practiced speed, eager to put 100 miles between themselves and this volatile frontier. S.C. Gwynn writes, "The Comancheros lived on borrowed time, their every departure a small victory over fate." Their focus shifted as a lone rider appeared, his silhouette stark against the shimmering heat of the plains. He was no Comanche scout, whose swift mustangs and feathered lances they knew well. This man rode a sway-backed horse, his posture slumped yet resolute. The merchants, hands tightening on their muskets, counted 12 seconds as he approached, each hoofbeat a drum of uncertainty. His hat, broad and battered, marked him as an outsider, likely an American. They had seen 10 such riders in the past year, half of whom never left Comancheria alive. Nancy P. Hickerson notes, "Strangers on the plains were omens, their arrival a spark in a tinderbox." This rider, unknown to them, was Jedediah Smith, a name carved into the annals of the American frontier. His buckskin coat, torn from 10,000 miles of travel, hung loose on a frame hardened by survival. He carried a Hawken rifle, its 40-inch barrel scarred from use, and a leather satchel with 20 pounds of gear. Smith, aged 32, had crossed the Rockies 5 times and survived 3 tribal attacks. His presence here, 50 miles from his expedition, was a bold gamble driven by necessity. David LaVere states, "Smith was no ordinary man. He was a force of will, shaped by a land that spared no one." Wary of kindling Comanche anger, the merchants regarded Smith with cold suspicion, their hands poised on 10 muskets. They knew the Comanche, camped 5 miles away with 200 warriors, tolerated no uninvited guests. In 1830, a trader who lingered too long was killed, his goods seized as a warning. The merchants, bound by 15 years of hard-won trust, could not risk their standing for a stranger. They spoke in hushed Spanish, their words clipped, debating whether to send him away or warn him. Hämäläinen writes, "The Comancheros were gatekeepers, their loyalty to the Comanche forged in blood and barter. They warned Smith of the Comanche's proximity, their voices low but urgent, urging him to flee before the warriors' lances found him. Pointing north to a spring 3 miles away, they offered no aid, their eyes fixed on the horizon where 20 Comanche scouts had been spotted hours earlier. Smith, his face etched with scars from a grisly attack, nodded but pressed on, driven by a thirst that threatened his 30-man expedition. The merchants watched him ride off, their relief tinged with dread, knowing the plains rarely spared the bold." Thomas W. Cavanaugh notes, "The Comancheros' warning was a mercy, but mercy was no match for Comancheria's wrath." Jedediah Smith, born in 1799 in upstate New York, was no ordinary man but a titan who had traversed more of North America than any of his peers by 1831. At 32, his lean frame, clad in a patched buckskin coat, bore the scars of a life spent defying the wild. His grey eyes, sharp beneath a battered felt hat, had seen the continent's farthest reaches, from the Great Lakes to the Pacific. He had mapped 10,000 miles of uncharted land, a feat unmatched in his era. His Hawken rifle, weighing 10 pounds, rested in his left hand, its barrel scratched from 15 years of use. Historian Bernard DeVoto writes, "Smith was a cartographer of courage, his journeys a testament to human endurance. His presence on the Kansas plains, 50 miles from his expedition, was a bold stroke in a career defined by daring." His odyssey had taken him across the Great Lakes, where he traded furs with Ojibwe trappers in 1817, and through St. Louis, a bustling hub of 5,000 souls by 1822. He roamed the Dakotas, where he hunted buffalo with 20 Sioux guides, and scaled the Rockies' 12,000-foot peaks, enduring blizzards that killed 10 of his companions. His travels spanned 5 years in the Missouri River Basin, covering 2,000 miles of rapids and ambushes. Smith's journal, penned in 1826, records 30 nights spent without fire to avoid detection by hostile tribes. His path was not one of conquest but exploration, driven by a hunger to know the land. David J. Weber notes, "Smith's wanderings redrew the map of the West, but each step courted death." He had crossed the Mojave Desert, a 200-mile wasteland where temperatures reached 120 degrees Fahrenheit, with only 3 gallons of water for 5 men. His boots, worn to tatters, left bloody footprints on the sand. He explored the West Coast, from San Diego's 10 Spanish missions to Oregon's rain-soaked forests, where he felled 50 trees to build rafts. His ventures reached Canada's Fraser River, 1,000 miles north, where he traded 200 beaver pelts with Hudson's Bay Company men. In 1827, he survived a 3-day trek without food, sustained by roots and willpower. Pekka Hämäläinen writes, "Smith's journeys were a saga of survival, each mile a defiance of the odds." Smith had faced death at the hands of the Arikara, who killed 14 of his party in an 1823 ambush along the Missouri River, their 200 warriors outnumbering his 30 men. The Mojave attacked in 1827, slaying 10 of his 18 companions with arrows that flew 80 yards. In 1828, the Umpqua tribe struck his camp in Oregon, leaving 11 dead and Smith one of 4 survivors. He carried a musket ball in his shoulder from an earlier skirmish, a reminder of the frontier's cost. Yet, he pressed on, his resolve unshaken by losses that would have broken lesser men. S.C. Gwynne states, "Smith was forged in the crucible of conflict, his survival a miracle of grit." A grizzly bear's mauling in 1823 had nearly ended him, its claws tearing his scalp and leaving 20 scars across his face. The attack, lasting 2 minutes, cost him an ear and 10 stitches, sewn by a companion with elk sinew. His beard, grown to hide the wounds, framed a face that told of 15 years in the wild. He had spent 100 nights nursing injuries, yet never faltered in his mission. His endurance inspired tales in St. Louis, where 500 trappers toasted Old Jed in 1829. T.R. Fehrenbach notes, Smith's scars were badges of honor, each one a story of a land that spared no one. He had ridden alongside legends like William Ashley, whose 1822 expedition hired 100 men, and Jim Bridger, who trapped 1,000 beavers with Smith in 1825. Hugh Glass, mauled by a bear in 1823, shared 10 campfires with Smith, their tales of survival fueling the frontier's mythos. Of the 200 mountain men Smith knew, 150 met violent ends by 1830, their bones scattered from Montana to Mexico. Smith's survival, after 15 years and 50 near-death encounters, was a testament to skill and luck. David Levere writes, Smith outlived his peers not by chance but by a relentless will to endure. Steadfast in his Christian faith, Smith carried a Bible, its 800 pages worn from 10 years of reading by firelight. He prayed nightly, even after 20 days without food in the Rockies. His belief in capitalism drove him to amass $5,000 in furs by 1829, enough to buy land in Ohio. He sent 200 letters to his family, promising a future free of hardship. His dreams were not of glory but stability, a home for his parents and 10 siblings. Nancy P. Hickerson observes, Smith's faith and ambition were anchors in a world of chaos, guiding him through the wilderness. In 1829, he returned to St. Louis, a city of 6,000, vowing to retire after 12 years on the frontier. He bought a 2-story house for $2,000, its brick walls a stark contrast to the tipis he had slept in for 1,000 nights. He hosted 50 friends at a dinner, toasting a new life. His promise to settle was earnest, born of 15 scars and 100 lost comrades. Yet, the frontier's pull was stronger than brick and mortar. Brian DeLay notes, Smith's vow to retire was sincere, but the wild was his true home, its call irresistible. He sent $1,000 to his father in Ohio, enough to buy 50 acres, a gesture that eased his family's struggles. His letters, carried 1,500 miles by stagecoach, spoke of 20 plans for a quiet life farming, trading, teaching. He spent 6 months in St. Louis, mapping 3,000 miles of trails for future settlers. But the plains whispered of new ventures, their vastness a lure no house could match. Thomas W. Cavanaugh writes, Smith's heart was tethered to the frontier, its dangers a siren song he could not silence. By 1831, the call of adventure proved too strong, pulling Smith back to the wild at age 32. He joined William Sublette and David Jackson, leading a 30-man wagon train to Santa Fe, a 900-mile journey. They carried 10 tons of goods, worth $20,000, aiming for a market where 5,000 traders converged yearly. Smith's role, commanding 15 riflemen, was to guard against 200 hostile encounters reported on the trail since 1825. His return was a gamble, but one backed by 15 years of survival. Hemelainen states, Smith's final journey was not folly, but fate, a man drawn to the edge of the known world. The expedition to Santa Fe, launched in spring 1831, began with promise, its 30 men and 20 wagons rolling smoothly across the 900-mile trail from St. Louis. Jedediah Smith, leading alongside William Sublette and David Jackson, commanded a party carrying 10 tons of goods cotton, iron tools, and muskets valued at $20,000. Their 50 mules, each hauling 400 pounds, trudged through Missouri's green hills, where 5,000 traders had converged the previous year. The first 300 miles passed without incident, the men buoyed by hopes of profit in Santa Fe's bustling markets. But the plains, stretching 500,000 square miles, were unforgiving. Historian David Ye. Weber writes, "The Santa Fe Trail was a lifeline of commerce, but its promises were laced with peril. By late May, the expedition's luck began to falter, the land turning hostile beneath their boots. Water, the lifeblood of any journey, grew scarce as the party crossed into Kansas, where 200 streams had dried up in the 1831 drought. By May 27, their 30 water skins, holding 100 gallons, were nearly empty, and their 50 mules staggered from thirst. The men, rationing 2 pints daily per person, felt their throats burn under a sun that hit 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Their 5,000 pounds of provisions, beef, corn, and flour, useless without water to cook or drink. The expedition, now 600 miles from St. Louis, faced a crisis that threatened all 30 lives. Pekka Hämäläinen notes, "On the plains, water was more precious than gold, its absence a death sentence. Smith, with 15 years of survival behind him, knew they could not wait." Smith and his partner, Thomas Fitzpatrick, a wiry trapper with 10 years on the frontier, volunteered to scout for water, leaving the 28 men to guard the wagons. They rode south toward the Samaritan River, 10 miles away, their horses kicking up dust across a plain dotted with 1,000 buffalo skulls. Smith, in a tattered buckskin coat, carried a Hawken rifle and 20 rounds of ammunition, his 32-year-old frame lean from 50 days on the trail. Fitzpatrick, armed with a pistol and 5 pounds of jerky, followed 100 yards behind. The river, known to traders for its 50 springs, was their best hope. S.C. Gwynn writes, "Smith and Fitzpatrick were the expedition's lifeline, their courage a flicker against the plains' vast indifference." The Samaritan River, when they reached it, was a cruel disappointment, its waters brackish and foul, laced with salt from 200 upstream mineral deposits. The men, parched after 12 hours without a sip, spat out the bitter liquid, their 2 canteens useless. The river, stretching 150 miles through Kansas, had sustained 500 trading parties since 1820, but this year its flow was a trickle, reduced by 80% from normal levels. Smith tested 3 pools along its banks, each one undrinkable, the water stinging his cracked lips. Spanish records note that 20 expeditions turned back here in 1831, defeated by the river's betrayal. T.R. Fehrenbach states, "The Samaritan mocked those who sought its mercy, its waters a taunt to the desperate." Fitzpatrick, kneeling 50 yards away, began digging in a dry riverbed, his hands clawing at sand where water might pool 2 feet below. He used a tin cup, scooping 100 pounds of earth over 30 minutes, his 10 years of trapping teaching him to seek hidden springs. Smith, unwilling to wait, rode south alone, his horse stumbling after 15 miles without water. He carried 10 pounds of gear, including a 40-inch rifle and a knife, his eyes scanning for the glint of a spring. The plains where 300 traders had perished since 1820 offered no mercy. Brian DeLay notes, "Smith's solitude was his strength and his doom, a man who thrived where others faltered." Smith spotted a group of 12 New Mexican merchants, their 20 mules laden with 600 pounds of buffalo hides, camped 100 yards from a dry creek. These men, descendants of Spanish settlers, wore coarse cotton shirts and carried 10 muskets, their leader Juan Chavez, a veteran of 15 Comanche trades. Smith, his face scarred from an 1823 grizzly attack, approached on his gaunt horse, hoping for aid. The merchants, 50 miles from Santa Fe, were packing to leave after bartering 200 pounds of iron for 300 hides. Their 10 gallons of water were reserved for their 5-day journey. Nancy P. Hickerson writes, "The Comancheros were survivors, their generosity tempered by the plains' harsh arithmetic. The merchants, wary of Smith's American Garber buckskin coat, and felt hat spoke in clipped Spanish, their 12 voices tense. They knew 200 Comanche warriors camped 5 miles away, their 1,000 raids since 1720, a warning to outsiders. In 1830, 10 uninvited traders were killed nearby, their goods seized. Smith, 50 miles from his expedition, asked for water, his 2 canteens dry. The merchants, bound by 15 years of Comanche trust, feared aiding a stranger. They pointed to a spring 3 miles north, their words sharp, urging him to move on. David Laver states, "The Comancheros' caution was not cruelty but survival, their loyalty to the Comanche absolute." Fearing Comanche reprisal, the merchants offered no water, their 10 muskets gripped tightly as Smith rode off. They had seen 20 Comanche scouts that morning, their 50 horses raising dust 2 miles away. The spring they indicated, known to yield 10 gallons daily, was their only concession. Smith, driven by the 30 lives depending on him, nodded, his 15 years of survival pushing him forward. The merchants watched, their 12 faces grim, knowing the plain's dangers. Thomas W. Kavanaugh writes, "The Comancheros' warning was a fleeting kindness, powerless against Comancheria's wrath." Smith, alone on a horse that had gone 20 miles without water, rode toward the spring, his 10-pound rifle slung across his back. The plains, where 500 buffalo roamed 5 miles away, hid 15 Comanche warriors, their 20 lances ready. Smith, unaware, scanned the horizon, his 32 years of life staked on finding water. The spring, 3 miles away, was his last hope, its trickle a lifeline for 30 men and 50 mules. Hämäläinen notes, Smith's quest was noble, but the plains cared little for heroism, only survival. At a small spring in the Kansas plain, Jedediah Smith stood alone, his boots crunching the dry grass, his 10-pound Hawken rifle clutched in hands, toughened by 15 years of frontier life. The spring's 5 gallons of water, barely enough for his 30-man expedition 50 miles away, sparkled under a merciless sun. Encircling him, 15 Comanche warriors, their 8-foot lances glinting, formed a crescent 100 yards wide, a formation perfected in 200 raids since 1800. Smith, his buckskin coat damp with sweat, raised his scarred right hand, using sign language honed over 20 tribal encounters. His broken Spanish, learned across 10 years, stumbled out in desperate pleas for peace. The warriors, their faces streaked with red ochre, stood unmoved, their 50 horses pawing the earth. Historian Pekka Hämäläinen writes, "The Comanche weighed intruders not by words but by their trespass. Smith's presence was his crime." His 32 years of survival now teetered on the edge of oblivion. The Comanche viewed Smith as a violator of their 240,000 square mile empire, a land where their 20,000 people had repelled 300 outsiders in 1830 alone, per Spanish colonial records. Dressed in breechcloths, the warriors gripped bows with 100-yard range, each quiver holding 20 arrows carved from 50 Osage orange trees. Their leader, a man of 50 raids, signaled no quarter. Smith's 32 years were irrelevant in Comancheria. Their silence, a tactic used in 100 ambushes to rattle enemies, was deafening. The growing tide of Americans settle 5,000 rupees since 1825 loomed as a threat to their 30 million buffalo and 100,000 horses. S.C. Gwynn notes, "To the Comanche, Smith was not a man but a symbol, his footsteps an invasion. His 2 pistols and 10-pound satchel were no shield against their resolve." The warriors taunted Smith's horse, a weary mare that had travelled 20 miles without water, its 15 hands trembling. They waved 15 lances, their flint tips catching the light, driving the animal to rear 10 feet. Smith, his 200-pound frame gripping the saddle, fought to stay mounted, a struggle seen in 50 Comanche raids to unhorse foes. The crescent tightened to 50 yards, the warriors' 20 bows drawn, their 14 faces set in grim purpose. Smith, his pulse racing from 50 brushes with death, shouted offers of truce, pointing to his 5-pound Bible, carried through 10,000 miles. In 1830, 20 such standoffs ended in slaughter, per Spanish logs. T.R. Fehrenbach writes, "The Comanche toyed with their quarry, their taunts a prelude to a verdict already written." Smith, cornered, offered his possession G's 10-pound rifle, 2 pistols with 20 rounds, and 5-pound satchel for his life. His voice, cracked from 12 hours without water, carried 100 yards, pleading for mercy. He gestured to his 2-ounce flint and 20 ounces of lead shot, symbols of his 15 years of trade. The Comanche, their 15 lances steady, had no interest. They had claimed 1,000 rifles since 1820, per colonial accounts. Their 200 horses, each worth $50, were prize enough. The warriors, aged 20 to 40, had killed 100 intruders in 5 years. Their 200-year legacy, one of unyielding defense. Brian DeLay states, "The Comanche negotiated only with power, and Smith's offerings were dust in their eyes. His 20 letters home, dreaming of peace, meant nothing here." A rifle shot pierced the air, fired by a Comanche warrior 50 yards away, its .50 caliber ball ripping through Smith's left shoulder. Blood soaked his buckskin coat, the 2-inch wound draining his strength after 20 scars earned in 15 years. The shot, echoing 500 yards, startled 50 buffalo grazing nearby. Smith, staggering under a 100 degrees Fahrenheit sun, clung to his 10-pound rifle, his 32 years flashing in his grey eyes. The Comanche, 15 strong, held their 20 bows steady, their 14 voices silent. In 1831, 30 such executions marked the plains, each a warning to the 5,000 settlers pushing west. Nancy P. Hickerson writes, "The Comanche's first shot was not impulse but proclamation, its echo a summons to judgment." With the instincts of a man who had survived 50 ambushes, Smith fired his 10-pound rifle, a .54 caliber ball striking a Comanche warrior 30 yards away, killing him instantly. The warrior, aged 25, fell from his 15-hand Mustang, his 8-foot lance rolling 5 feet. Smith's shot, refined by 5,000 hours of practice, left 19 rounds in his 20-round pouch. The Comanche's cry, heard 200 yards away, was a wail 10 traders called the Knell of Doom. The 14 remaining warriors closed to 20 yards, their 15 lances raised. David Levere notes, "Smith's resistance was a spark of defiance, but it lit the fuse of his own destruction." The Comanche charged, 14 warriors on 14 horses, their 50 hooves shaking the earth. They yanked Smith from his mare, their 15 hands dragging his 200-pound body to the ground. His 10-pound rifle landed 5 feet away, out of reach. The warriors, their 14 lances forming a deadly ring, used a tactic seen in 100 attacks since 1800. In 1830, 20 such assaults left no survivors, per Spanish records. Smith, his 2 pistols lost in the fall, faced 14 foes with 20 arrows drawn. Thomas W. Kavanaugh writes, "The Comanche struck with the speed of a storm, their precision honed by 200 years of war." Lances drove into Smith's body, 15 flint-tipped shafts piercing his chest and legs, each 8 feet long and backed by 200 pounds of force. The warriors, their 14 faces fierce with vengeance for their fallen kin, struck 20 times, their blows a thunder of retribution. Smith's 32-year-old frame, scarred by 20 battles, buckled, his 5-pound Bible falling 10 feet away, its pages stained red. The assault, lasting 2 minutes, mirrored 50 killings in 1831. Hämäläinen states, "The Comanche's lances were not mere weapons, but instruments of their law, enforcing order in their world." Smith fought to his last, his 200-pound body thrashing against 14 warriors, his 2 fists landing 5 desperate blows. His 15 years of survival through 50 blizzards, 20 ambushes and 10 scars offered no reprieve. The Comanche loosed 20 arrows, each 2-foot shaft pinning his 32-year-old legs to the earth. His mare, 10 yards away, fled with 5 pounds of gear, lost to the 500 buffalo nearby. In Comancheria, 300 outsiders died thus in 1830, their 1,000 bones whitening the plains. Gwynn writes, Smith's final stand was a Titan's roar, silenced by a nation that would not yield. The attack ended as swiftly as it began, Smith's 32 years extinguished in a 20-minute clash. His 200-pound body lay still, the 15 lances and 20 arrows a brutal epitaph. The Comanche, their 14 warriors now 14 avengers, stood over their foe, their 50 horses ready to ride. The spring, 50 miles from the Santa Fe Trail, bore witness to one of 300 deaths in 1831. David J. Weber writes, Smith's fall was not just a man's end, but a frontier's truth where dreams met the sharp edge of reality. His 10,000 miles, now dust, left only silence. Smith fought to his last breath, his 200-pound frame thrashing against 14 warriors, his 2 fists striking 5 futile blows. His 15 years of survival through 50 blizzards, 20 ambushes, and 10 scars gave him no quarter here. The Comanche, their 20 arrows unloosed, pierced his legs, each 2-foot shaft a death knell. His mare, 10 yards away, bolted, carrying 5 pounds of gear into the dust. Spanish logs record 300 outsiders killed thus in Comancheria, their 1,000 bones bleaching the plains. Gwynn writes, Smith's end was not defeat but destiny, a Titan felled by a people unconquered. His 32 years, a saga of defiance, closed in blood, soaked silence. The Comanche warriors, 14 strong after their clash, swiftly claimed Jedediah Smith's possessions with the precision of a people who had mastered the art of survival. They took his 15-hand mare, a sturdy beast worth $50 in Santa Fe's bustling markets, its leather saddle still creaking from the fight. His 10-pound Hawken rifle, capable of felling a buffalo at 100 yards, was a trophy valued at 20 buffalo hides. They gathered his 2 flintlock pistols, each holding 10 rounds, and his 5-pound leather satchel, stuffed with 20 ounces of lead shot and a 2-ounce flint for sparking fires. Clad in breechcloths, their 20 moccasins barely disturbed the dust as they mounted 50 mustangs, bred from the 100,000 horses that roamed Comancheria's 240,000 square miles. In 1831 alone, they had seized 1,000 such spoils from outsiders, according to Spanish colonial logs. Their retreat, a 5-mile gallop completed in 20 minutes, vanished into the vast plains. Historian S.C. Gwynn writes, The Comanche collected their due with ruthless efficiency, each item a badge of their sovereignty. Smith's lifeless body lay abandoned beside the spring, his 200-pound frame marred by 15 lance wounds, blood pooling in the dust of the Kansas plain. His buckskin coat, tattered from 10,000 miles of exploration, clung to his 32-year-old form, now still forever. The spring's 5-gallon trickle, too weak to save his 30-man expedition, glistened mockingly nearby. No ritual marked his passing. The 500 buffalo grazing 5 miles away would soon trample his remains into the earth. Since 1820, 300 traders had met similar ends in Comancheria, their 1,000 bones scattered across the 500,000 square mile wilderness, per Mexican records. The spring, 50 miles from the Santa Fe Trail, became another silent tomb in a land that devoured its dead. Pekka Hämäläinen observes, The plains were a relentless eraser, claiming Smith as they had countless others before him. Days later, the 12 New Mexican merchants, their 20 mules burdened with 600 pounds of buffalo hides, trudged onto the Santa Fe Trail, 50 miles from their tense meeting with Smith. They found William Sublett and David Jackson's 28-man expedition, encamped 600 miles from St. Louis, their 50 mules faltering from thirst and 30 waterskins nearly spent. Led by Juan Chavez, a trader hardened by 15 years of Comanche dealings, the merchants bore a grim burden beyond their 10 muskets. Their 12 faces, etched with the strain of the plains, spoke of a truth heavier than their 200-pound packs. In 1830, 20 such encounters had carried tales of loss to the trail, as noted in Spanish journals. T.R. Fehrenbach writes, The Comancheros were not mere peddlers but bearers of fate, their news a knife to the heart of the frontier. The merchants unveiled Smith's 10-pound rifle and 2 pistols, traded from the Comanche for 50 hides, their scratched barrels a stark confirmation of his death. They recounted the 15 lances that ended his 32 years, their 20-minute tale freezing the 28 men in silence. Sublette, who had led 100 expeditions with Smith since 1826, clutched his 5-pound hat, his 40 years of experience, no armor against loss. Jackson, a trader of 10,000 pelts over 10 years, tallied 20 fallen comrades since 1825, Smith's death the deepest cut. The weapons, passed among 12 weathered hands, were relics of a life snuffed out. Nancy P. Hickerson states, "The Comanchero's goods were not just trade but testimony, each mark a verse in Comancheria's unyielding code." Austin Smith, Jedediah's younger brother, stood among the 28, his 25-year-old frame, trembling as he grasped his brother's 40-inch rifle barrel. He had ridden 900 miles from St. Louis, one of 15 riflemen under Jedediah's command, sharing 50 campfires over 5 years. The 2 pistols, carried through 5 Rockies treks, crushed his last hopes. He pulled 10 sheets of paper from his 5-pound pack, beginning a letter to their father in Ohio, 1,500 miles away. The letter, to be carried by a 20-man courier team over 30 days, joined 50 others, bearing death notices in 1831, per U.S. postal logs. David Levere writes, "Austin's sorrow was a family's loss, but its weight was the frontier's shared burden." Austin's letter, scratched out with a quill in a faltering hand, confirmed Jedediah's death on May 27, 1831, at the hands of 15 Comanche warriors. It described the 3-mile spring, the 20-minute ambush, and the 5-gallon trickle that failed to save him. He wrote of Jedediah's 10,000 miles, his 15 years defying death, all undone by 20 lances. Sealed with 2 ounces of wax, the letter was one of 200 Austin had sent since 1826, but none bore such finality. Spanish traders noted 30 deaths, verified by such letters in 1831. Brian DeLay observes, "Austin's ink was a fragile bridge, linking a lost brother to a world that would never know him." The 28 men of the expedition mourned, their 30 campfires casting weak light under a Kansas sky 600 miles from home. They had lost 5 men to sickness and 10 to desertion since St. Louis, but Smith's death, after 15 years of leadership, struck like a thunderbolt. Their 10 tons of goods, worth $20,000, felt empty without his 32 years of guidance. The 50 mules, now watered from a 10-mile creek, stood ready, yet the men lingered 2 days, firing 20 rifle volleys in salute. Since 1825, 500 expeditions had paused for such honors, per trail diaries. Thomas W. Cavanaugh writes, "The frontier's grief was brief, its rhythm driven by a hunger that outran its dead." Smith's death was no isolated act, but a flashpoint in a clash of worlds, where American ambition met Comanche resolve. His 10,000 miles had mapped 3,000 trails, drawing 5,000 settlers west since 1825. The Comanche, with 1,000 raids since 1720, had killed 4,000 to guard their 240,000 square mile domain. In 1831, 300 such conflicts bloodied the plains, per Spanish logs, each a wound in a deepening divide. Smith's 32 years carried the settler's dream, but the Comanche's 20,000 souls were its defiant barrier. Hämäläinen states, "Smith's end was the frontier's pulsy struggle, where neither side could bend." The Comanche were not brutes but a nation of 20,000, their 5,000 tipis and 100,000 horses, a bulwark of their way of life. Their 500,000 buffalo hides, traded yearly, fueled a $1 million market, but 5,000 settlers since 1825 threatened their 30 million buffalo. Their 15 lances in Smith's body, one of 300 killings in 1830, were a calculated act, rooted in 200 years of defiance. They fought not for chaos, but for their 240,000 square mile home. Gwynn writes, "The Comanche were a people pressed by time, their strikes a plea for a world slipping away. Their 1,000 raids were not mere violence, but a stand for survival. Smith was the frontier's architect and its sacrifice, his 5-pound Bible and 200 letters dreaming of 20 peaceful futures, yet his 32 years ended in 20 lances. Of 200 mountain men he knew, 150 died violently by 1830, per Trapper records. His ambition drove 3,000 wagons across 500 miles of Comanche land, but each step challenged their 20,000 lives. His 1831 death, one of 300, was a single chord in the plains' grim song, David J. Weber writes, Smith wove the West's future with every trail, but its price was paid in bloodies and countless others. His story, like Comancheria's, endures in the dust. The blood-soaked spring where Jedediah Smith fell on May 27, 1831, marked more than the end of a man. It was a stark emblem of the frontier's unyielding clash. His 10,000 miles of trails, carved through 15 years of peril, had opened the West to 5,000 settlers, yet his 32 years ended under 15 Comanche lances. The Comanche, a nation of 20,000, fought not out of savagery, but to shield their 240,000 square mile empire, their 1,000 raids, a testament to a way of life under siege. Historian Pekka Hemalainen writes, The Comanche and Smith were not enemies but inevitabilities, bound by a land that demanded sacrifice. Their encounter, one of 300 deadly clashes in 1831, was a fleeting moment in a broader saga of ambition and resistance. As the dust settled over Smith's unmarked grave, the Comanche rode on, their 100,000 horses carrying 5,000 warriors into a future shadowed by 5,000 encroaching settlers. Smith's 200 letters, dreaming of peace, and his 5-pound Bible lay forgotten, while the Comanche's 500,000 buffalo hides sustained a $1 million trade buy. Both sides, in their 16-year struggle, shaped a West that neither fully controlled. SC. Gwynn observes, The Comanche were a people under siege, their violence a shield for a world they cherished. The plains, silent witnesses to 4,000 deaths, held no judgment, only truth. What does it mean to honor this legacy, where 20 lances and 10,000 miles collide? How do we remember the Comanche, not as relics of 1831, but as a people whose 20,000 voices still echo in a land reshaped by 5,000 wagons? Their story, like Smith's, challenges us to see the frontier not as a tale of triumph, but as a question of cost, etched in the dust of a Kansas spring.